Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum viewers. I'm your host S.M. Hali, presenting another episode of Defense and Diplomacy. Two events in the near past created ripples in the strategic balance in the region. The first was the induction of the Russian-leased Akula-class nuclear-powered submarine has been rechristened as Indian naval submarine Chakra. The second was the test of the Indian intercontinental ballistic missile Agni-V, which is being projected as having a range of more than 5,000 kilometers and is supposed to be nuclear tipped. What are the implications of these developments? We are honored to have in our studio today Dr. Maria Sultan, a renowned defense analyst. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
We have with us Ambassador Tariq Osman Hyder, who has not only seen various capitals of the world, but has also proved his mettle as a security analyst. Welcome, sir. And of course, we have with us Professor Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, whose writings and eloquence on the subject of defense and security matters does not need any introduction. Dr. Maria, let's talk about the test of the Agni-V. How do you look at it and what are its implications?
I think when we look at it just purely from a technical perspective, it puts India into a different league because it is an intermediate, it gives them an intermediate continental ballistic missile capability because it's got more than a range of 5,000 kilometers. But more than that, the issue here is the developments which India has got in terms of the software, which is required for much more precision-oriented targeting. Then it is the inertial navigation system and the micro-navigation system, which is a testament to the fact that it is stepping into the next aspect of not only development of missile capability, but also likely in the future to develop MRFing capability. And when we talk about a range of a missile, we definitely talk about it in terms of how far the missile can go. But it is rarely understood the implications it would also have on India's other ballistic missiles, which are not of that high range, but would definitely have a flow-down effect in terms of the capability and the sophistication, which this test shows that now India has this capability. This test also signifies that it is not just merely India's indigenous capability which has materialized and we are seeing it the way it is. It shows that perhaps there has been the open access to technology which has been given to India as a result of the NSG waiver is also playing out in India's interest.
Okay. So in the 1990s, we saw that the United States of America had asked India to restrain its program, especially the Agni program. But then probably in 1997, it restarted it, and quoting examples of Pak-China collaboration in the missile technology field. Now the Americans appear to be providing a tacit approval to this. How do you look at it, sir?
Well, first of all, I think it's a question of Indian propaganda about alleged cooperation between China and Pakistan. This is not a cooperation which either side has in any case said was correct. But to go to the implications, which I think you're right, your thing that you're saying out there, there are three implications. One is the fact that nobody in the West and the Americans have more or less condoned, if not lauded this development. And they've said that, while they've said that all nuclear-capable powers should be careful, etc., but they, at the same time, they've said that India is a responsible nuclear state, it has a good non-proliferation record, and it has a no first-use policy. You may remember that in the case of Russia, during the entire Cold War, the Americans said that the no first-use pledge was, they totally dismissed it as something that you couldn't rely on. What it means is the Americans are obviously trying to build up India against China, and the Indians call this missile China killer. The second thing is that we've always prided ourselves that while we've been far behind India in space launch technology and capabilities, in terms of ballistic missiles, our technology, our progress has been, if anything, better and more sophisticated and quicker than India. But now I think this is a wake-up call for us. We will have to relook at our capabilities and to see how they could be better. Not that the Agni is Pakistan specific. No,
it's not, sir. But as the ambassador also pointed out, a number of opinion makers have opined that including the Indians themselves, that the Agni-V is China-specific. But Chinese analysts, on the other hand, have pointed out that the actual range is probably more than 5,000 kilometers, and it can target targets in Europe. But the Indians are deliberately playing down the range so that there is no criticism from Europe. How do you see this?
No, I think that there are two things which we need to keep in mind. First, I refer back what you said, that in 1990s they restrained because of Americans. No, it was a technological restraint, because at that time Agni was a product of two technologies: American Scout Space Launch Vehicle and plus Scud. So the Scud was not, they were not able to mix it. So that's why there are 3 test failure, and then they went clandestinely to Israel for aero missile technology, and then after Americans' approval, it became a defense pact, and as a result, Agni projects start moving ahead. So number one is this clarification we need to keep in mind.
Good, I think.
That is one fact. Second fact is that it's very interesting when the Indians use the word that Agni's range is 5,000 kilometers, and then they use word intercontinental ballistic missile. And then at the same time, when we go with the traditional categorization of the missiles, normally we say that intercontinental ballistic missile is that one which has a range more than 5,500 kilometers. But at the same time, if we can go with the missiles technology, and when we focus on its trajectory curve, then you can increase by decreasing the payload sometimes. So 500 for a 5,000 kilometer range is nothing. So that's why they are using and they are reinventing a new term. Secondly, even if it is a 5,000 kilometer range, I did a research. India has different parts. If it go from the southern side, from there it's easier to reach Europe. Even Agni-4, Agni-3, which have ranges between the lesser than 4,000 kilometers, 37, 3,000, they can touch certain places. So this missile, Agni-V, today the Europeans, or you can say the other Americans, they are not protesting. The reason is very simple, that they are at the moment thinking to make India's phony rivalry with China to become a real rivalry with China. So that's why they are silent, and the entire focus is on the Chinese side. If you look the Chinese press, they are just simply relaxing. They are saying, of course, it is capable to hit Beijing and Shanghai, but at the same time, they are not looking or giving it as much importance. But we have to look at that missiles have, or any striking capability, itself has its dynamics. And now I'm looking that, for example, as Ambassador very rightly pointed out, that this missile, when we look at it, we should not be concerned of it. Why? Because its range goes to the others. It creates security dilemma for the Europeans. It creates security dilemma for the other countries in addition to the China. So that is a benchmark which we have to keep in mind.
Right. And then we notice, of course, the actual induction is at least 2 years away. And Indians will have to carry out a number of you see progress on various aspects. One of them is probably the transportability, because it's huge size, although they're claiming that it's going to be canister controlled. But do you think that they have the infrastructure to transport it from one location to another?
I think I'm just going to build up on what Dr. Jaspal said, because the issue here is in terms of what kind of technological support India has received, and especially its ballistic missile program has received. And I think that is of critical importance here, because it's not only going to impact on the ballistic missile capability, and as you can see, it's a solid fuel. So whenever you have a solid fuel capability, definitely it is much more road mobile and it's much more savvy in terms of movements across India. The question will remain how developed is India's infrastructure, how much they want to trust their military, and how much they want to operationalize their capability. That's a question of the Indian civil-military relationship, and also how they want to ensure that chain of command remains, and there is that never and always dilemma sufficiently addressed while dealing with the operationalization. But in terms of their plans, in terms of the India's minimum credible doctrine, quote unquote, they do plan to operationalize it, but not only their road-based capability, but also their sea-based capability, and that's what they would be looking at. I think from our point of view, we should be looking at in terms of what kind of implications it would have in the space program, in terms of the satellite imagery, and most importantly, how fast this software development and other things are coming in. Because if it develops and they come in very fast, and as we can see, the systems which I had also earlier mentioned, then it does have a flow-down effect in terms of their central error probability, and how precise their weapon systems are, and whether or not they can succinctly develop them in accordance to their military doctrines. And that is, which is, I think, the real concern, that how the technology is coming in, how fast it is being picked up, and most importantly, what kind of level of confidence does it give to the Indian military planners, and then subsequently the Indian strategic planners vis-a-vis any of their military engagements for the future.
Right, and as the Indian media as well as the scientists claim that this particular test has placed them in a different class altogether. But
it has helped India to pick up the gaps. You see, the Indian gaps were in technology, like Jaspal was saying, because they had mixed two technologies. And this is not just true for India's ballistic missile. India had been doing this for its nuclear power reactors. It has been doing it for other things. Indian idea of indigenization is to take few aspects from one technology and take another aspect and then try to dovetail it and then say that that is indigenized. But that's not how indigenization works. It also reflects Pact 3 elements coming in, and also the real concern would be in terms of the MRFing ability. Because if they are able to develop MRFing, then it means there is going to be a cause of concern if they can do it for a shorter range as well. The higher your missile range is, yes, we might not be the target for it at the moment, but it does mean that it can have a flow-down effect in terms of development of the technologies at different level, and the level of operationalization, which would perhaps make them feel much more differently about the whole issue.
So let's talk about the Indian nuclear-powered submarine program. For the time being, they have inducted this Russian Akula class, renamed as Chakra, but the main thrust is on their indigenization program, especially the Arihant, which has already commenced sea trials and is likely to be inducted either by the end of this year or probably early next year. And there are 5 more, or rather 4 more, in the pipeline. How do you look at it, sir?
I think one aspect which we haven't touched on is that the induction of the Arihant, as the government or the Foreign Office at that time said, is a bad development because it is an induction of a new WMD into the region. That's what they said then. And I think the thing about these 2 new developments is that, first of all, the Akula class, it can carry nuclear-capable cruise missiles. So, and thirdly, it is a violation of the NSG and NPT guidelines because the reactor is not safeguarded. So there is no exception for that.
In fact, this particular submarine had an accident in 2008 which delayed the induction, and in which 20 sailors, who were of course Russian at that time, they died in this.
Yeah, but my point is that if you have to safeguard all nuclear reactors, this has got no safeguards. It's a violation of the NPT obligation of Russia. And the other thing is that as Maria had said, the MIRV capability and other capabilities of Agni it again is another induction, a proliferation of a WMD system. It is disturbing that the Western countries and other countries have not criticized this, or rather to the contrary. But it's equally surprising that Pakistan officially has not criticized this as another a proliferation of a WMD into our region. It doesn't matter if it overflies us. If you've got 10 MIRVs, the same MIRVs can land on the way here and go on somewhere else.
Perhaps we are still weighing our options, but as Professor Jaspal pointed out, that the West is trying to build up India to counterbalance China. I'll just come back to you, Maria. Your opinion, sir, on the Indian nuclear submarine, especially because the Indian planners are now harping on the completion of the triad, the nuclear triad.
Yeah, it's correct. You have rightly pointed out that it's a one step ahead in the nuclear triad of India. I think it's a concern for all the Indian Ocean littoral state, including Pakistan. We have seen that Chinese have moved into the southern Asia or seasides of Southeast Asia with the aircraft carrier. So Indians think that with they have an agenda of the Blue Water Navy. Now here, when we look about whenever the Indians' military muscles start fattening, it has an impact on Pakistan's security. That's why we are concerned about it. But we are living with this and we are facing. Now, point here is that India normally says that it has a rivalry with China. China has a $60 billion trade with it. So China is not giving these kind of developments any significant or any important. Yes, for us it is significant. But at the same time, as I referred earlier, let me repeat it again, that when the weapon comes in the arsenal of any state, it generates some kind of a dynamism, and the state becomes more aggressive. And here comes the great part, The difference with the Americans, I think, the Pakistani analyst is that when you use the term great power or rising great power, it means that all the regional powers or the neighbors of that great power, they should salute it as a subordinatory or secondary powers. Pakistan is competing that we are not a secondary, we are equal to it. So our difference is that whether it's a great power or not, we are equal. So you cannot de-hyphen, though Americans de-hyphen it by putting India under the Pacific Command and Pakistan under the Central Command, but our border is same, so that's why we have to take it. Second important thing is that, of course, it's more symbolic. In 1983, when the integrated ballistic missile program started, at that time we were also looking this mixture of technologies, as Maria was pointing out, that it was symbolic, but today it is delivering them. Tomorrow, if you see when it started delivering, when the Israelis started cooperating in 2004, Americans and India signed a space program, and as you know, the space technology and missile technology is identical. And then the lifting
although they try to keep them separate,
yeah,
but
no, it's not separate.
It's not.
American President Kennedy is a very good quotation. Somebody asked him what is different between the space launch vehicle and ballistic missile. He said intention. And for us, intention is not important. For us, capability is important. So in that context, definitely, both when you put it, and as it was already pointed out, that India is now moving with, it has a cruise missile, and it is moving with that sort of a capability. Definitely with the nuclear, you can say, reactor submarine, it will stay in the sea for a longer time. It will be more efficient, and definitely generate security dilemma for a number of the states.
Right. Now, the question actually arises, which I would like you to address. What is the way forward for us? We carried out our own test yesterday, but that is in no way a tit-for-tat test, because this is a different class of missile, and obviously it must have been planned way ahead. How do you say that we need to move ahead?
I think that just two issues just before I answer your question, which I just like to add on. I think the issue at India's nuclear submarine is not just purely a question of a capability, but it is also a question of the delegative system which it brings India with the possibility of, it makes a reality of that possibility. That means that the entire Asia Pacific would be having a nuclear capable submarine which is also capable of carrying nuclear delivery systems. And if it is capable of carrying nuclear delivery systems, then it means that it would be based on delegation. So it means that you've not only operationalized a nuclear capability, but you have also delegated it, which means that you've suddenly raised the level of threat not only to Pakistan, but also to other countries which are prevalent if there is any kind of a security situation which arises. The commander in the nuclear sub has got plans, and he has got full authority to launch a nuclear capability as he thinks that the security or the risk assessment is foreseen by him. And that's one of the biggest fears of a nuclear triad. That is the sea-based capability, because it gives delegation as the top level of command structures.
And in the case of India, by 2025 they will have 14 conventional submarines and 5 nuclear-powered submarines. So that really makes it a...
You see, a nuclear-powered submarine means, and if they're looking at operationalizing their nuclear triad, this means you've already delegated. So while we are talking about recess deterrence and we are talking about different issues, you're already operationalizing, and not only operationalizing, and you're giving the command as well. So if you're giving the command, the level of threat is altogether different. It is no longer the same league, and that's a real problem.
Second, the way forward for us,
the way forward, I think, would be in terms of, or like you talked about, our system. I think our system is basically trying to fill in the gaps of not providing India any operational space in terms of deterrence gaps which could emerge. So it's in terms of developing our tactical capability in a very specific manner, and most importantly, also battle-worthy, and also to ensure that there are multiple layers of deterrence stability which can be ensured. Way forward could be perhaps a regional arms control agreement in which we could have an agreement with India, perhaps in which you can talk about perhaps some kind of structures which are much more apt, maybe something like an ABM treaty which can be put forward, because there is an anti-ballistic missile capability which not only India is developing, but of the Akash system, but it is also getting these systems under Aero technology and PAC-3 system from the United States. And if you use offensive and defensive technologies together, they tend to lead towards an offensive. So in this case, we think a regional arms control agreement could be perhaps the best way forward. And that could be negotiated independently with Pakistan and India, despite the fact that India argues that India's nuclear program and missile program is with China. They can continue with their rivalry with China, but with Pakistan, if we are not the threat for them, then they should have no problems in negotiating some kind of an arms agreement with us.
Point taken. So what do you propose is the way forward?
Well, I think if we look at, first is on the international front, obviously we should try to mobilize some attention on the Agni-V. I think that's the first response we have internationally. The second thing on the technical side, or strategic and tactical side, is that obviously we have to continue to try to work for a triad ourselves, which means to start off with submarines with probably nuclear-capable cruise missiles. That is the logical counter that one has. And thirdly, if it is not a breach of the NPT for India to have nuclear submarines, whether it's for training or for cruise missiles, we should then in that case work for the same capability ourselves. If we can't build it right now, maybe we can have it on loan or lease it.
So Professor Jaspal, she proposed a number of treaties, and it talks about developing such...
Sorry, the last thing was, I don't think the Indians are at all interested in having any regional arms control treaty with us, unfortunately.
I'd just like to add,
unfortunately, yes.
I agree with you that it's not that they would like to have that, but the question is that you have to build pressure and you have to come up with some kind of tangible ideas which can be at least placed so that the international community understands the risk which this region is having. And the risks have to be highlighted, and there has to be some pause of concern which the international community, which is right now the technology giver, should be placing on India. India has not developed this technology indigenously overnight.
Absolutely.
They have got the technology access from our American friends, they've got it from other NSG supplier states, and they should be taking
including the
PWR
for the Arihant. They claim it is indigenous, but we have information that it has been borrowed from the Russians.
Well, I think it is the case for all of the Indian technology, and I think while they might be indigenizing it at different levels, but the technology, the patents definitely do not belong to India.
Right. If you permit, I would like to listen to Professor Jaspal's opinion.
I think that way forward need very careful. First of all, that Pakistan, of course, we have a parallel debates, arms control and readjusting ourselves. Pakistan has to revise its nuclear posture very carefully. And in that context, I am again submitting here that we should not be victim of India's bait and bloodletting strategy. We should be very careful in this context, number one. Of course, we are not concerned about the Agni-V as such, but at the same time we have to look the deterrence demands every day something. And Pakistan is doing something. As we have seen, Agni, as the Shaheen 1A was tested with some new developments. It was a technological moving ahead, but they didn't give it range, but we have put it Shaheen 1. So Shaheen 1 means that it will remain in the small, medium range. So with that context, that is what...
But it would have nuclear capability.
Yeah. Third is that here comes very important point. Both Maria and the ambassador has pointed out. We cannot ignore, when we talk about arms control, of course India is not coming on the table, but arms control is a big catch. It is just like a net, which is they try to throw on Pakistan, like in this conference of disarmament. They are asking us on FMCT. On the other side, entire 20th century well-constructed arms control or nuclear non-proliferation regime has been destabilized. And this submarine is a one step forward to destabilize NPT. So by that context, Pakistani diplomats and government should be very careful about this, what is happening internationally about the arms control and what we have to work on it.
Right.
So we should be very careful.
Okay. So viewers, with that we come to the end of this very intense debate. The topic was such, and we have such eloquent speakers who are a wealth of information that we could perhaps go on. And the topic merits a greater discussion. But the point which has emerged from this particular discussion is that India has definitely created ripples, and Pakistan's way forward is that we need to internationalize our concerns, because these concerns are not ethnocentric, not only in the view of Pakistan, but they affect the entire region as well as Europe, the Middle East, and Australia, Indonesia included. I would like to thank you, Dr. Maria Sultan. I would like to thank you, Ambassador Tariq, Osman, Hyder, and Professor Zafar, Nawaz, Jaspal, for your very cogent comments. Viewers, hope to see you next week, inshallah. Allah Hafiz.